Hey everyone, I'm Mary Beth McAndrews from Dread Central, and I'm here today with Conor Boru, director of When the Screaming Starts, and Ed Hartland, star and writer of, or co-writer of When the Screaming Starts. Conor also wrote the script. Hello, how are you guys?
Hello.
Hi, yeah, good.
So
Very well.
was very excited to watch this movie because I am a big found footage pseudo documentary person. So as soon as I saw this movie, I was like, I have to see it. I love this format. So I was curious, first off, why y'all were drawn to that kind of format for the film.
I suppose, kind of not to speak for Conor, obviously, but myself, I loved found footage films since I first saw Blair Witch ages ago, and yeah, so I've always been drawn to that. I think as well as just enjoying the subgenre for kind of independent filmmaking position, it's quite useful to keep things under control, finance wise.
It has its advantages. I mean,
Yeah.
Ed came up with the original script idea, and we've been trying to make a feature film at the time for quite a while. We've made loads of shorts and theatre shows and all sorts. And when he approached me with the initial idea, it just felt like something that was achievable on an indie budget.
For sure. Oh yeah, found footage is definitely like the format to go for lower budget, but you can do some really awesome stuff. Like, and your film looks pretty sleek too. I mean, especially because it's not the shaky cam, it's more of that mockumentary style. But so Ed, you said this was your idea, so I'm curious, where was this idea for the film kind of born out of?
Yeah, so it kind of started when I was reviewing the Ted Bundy tapes for London Horror Society. And I was watching that and kind of finding myself kind of equally fascinated by what I was watching, and also completely repulsed, and had this weird thing of not being able to look away from it. And I started to kind of question what that said about me, and what it says about society at large, that we are fascinated by that horrendous kind of, those horrendous events and those horrendous people. So I had that kind of sparked the initial idea. I took that to Conor, and as as Conor says, we've been kind of trying to make feature films for years, and this was an idea that kind of clicked with both of us, and kind of brought in ideas of ambition and how far someone will go to achieve their goal, but taking it to quite an extreme place with homicide.
Casual and a cult.
As you do.
So are you both true crime people? Like, is that something that interests you besides outside of Ted Bundy tapes? Is that something that interests either of you at all?
Well, for me, I was somewhat, I wouldn't say a virgin coming into this. I've always had a fascination with true crime, but compared to Ed, my knowledge was infinitely smaller on serial killers. I mean, Ed's like an encyclopedia with this stuff. But obviously through making the film, I did a fair bit of research, and yeah, my mind hasn't been the same since. Some things you can't unsee.
As someone who also loves serial killers, yes, you probably have some horrendous things just kind of seared into your brain now.
Yeah, that stuff doesn't leave you. That's there for life.
Yeah, I don't recommend being on the receiving end of Ed's research. It's quite horrific, but yeah, it was definitely eye-opening, to say the least. Obviously, I've heard a lot of stories about the ones that everyone knows in pop culture, but Ed had some other undiscovered gems that he sent my way. So,
like who?
Really throw Ed under the bus day, isn't it? No, it was kind of true crime is, I've always been fascinated by it. My sister and me, when we were little, would read true crime stories that were way kind of far too old for us to be reading, and that kind of lodged in. I mean, if you want to throw in little kind of niche bits of knowledge, one thing I tried to get into the script, but we didn't go for it for obvious reasons, was the origin of Sweet FA, which actually means Sweet Fanny Adams, which was someone who was murdered and chopped up into little pieces. So that is the origin of Sweet FA, and for obvious reasons, that got vetoed from the script. at quite an early stage.
And so, Connor, I'm curious, what were some of the what was some of the the more horrifying things you learned while you were making this movie? Some of those serial killers that were peppered in there.
I've tried to black it all out now, to be honest. Obviously, Ted Bundy was what sparked this whole thing off. So that was definitely, you know, there's quite a few references to him. Charles Manson, I think there's at least 2 or 3. You know, we took the idea of starting a family and sort of ran with that. So I did quite a bit of research into Charles Manson and his family. Yeah, those 2 were the main ones for this film. And again, those are the more what would you call them? The more famous serial killers that are out there. Yes,
well,
infamous. I should say. Yeah, I should say infamous.
I did like the Albert Fish reference.
Yes,
because he's awful but fascinating. It sounds weird whenever you say that about Albert Fish because you don't want to sound like a total freak. But
yeah, it's hard to say anything about serial killers without coming across like a total freak. But I think that was one of the things that we were trying to do is balance out that fascination that people have. That, you know, people who are fascinated in true crime aren't total freaks. They are fascinated by something that is fascinating, but it's also incredibly dark. And yeah, we wanted to kind of play with that idea and drag out, you know, when it needs to go dark, we'll go dark with the story, but also have that comedy kind of flowing throughout. And, you know, that was a conversation basically we were having for 2 years on a daily basis of what's the balance? Are we tipping too far over into kind of one territory or the other? So it's been a long old conversation that's largely revolved around dark comedy and serial killers.
that sounds like my type of thing, but it's not. I love that. But so did you write the script thinking that you were going to star in it, Ed?
Kind of, yeah. It's a bit of a weird one because initially the very first idea for this was just as a short film. So I kind of wrote the very early kind of stages of it with myself and Jared Rogers, who plays Norman, the documentarian in the film. I wrote it as this little short film that was just going to be a conversation between the 2 of us, and it spiraled from there. I mean, that's the kind of thing about everything to do with this film. It's snowballed every step of the way. It's got bigger and bigger. So I wrote the very first kind of short film idea going, well, I'll be in that. And then when it kind of transformed into something bigger, I'd kind of already put myself in that position, which was quite useful because I think if I had planned on writing a feature with Conor like this, I wouldn't have wanted to put myself, I'll play the main role.
I think there's a lot of parallels to Ed as well, all except, you know, the serial killer thing. I don't know about that. I can't comment.
No.
But, you know, in terms of the costume, you know, the musical tastes, obsessed with horror, you know, there's a lot of parallels there. So
that's amazing. But besides your character, obviously, like who were some of your favorites to write? Because there are so many personalities in this movie, and I love when movies have these like little personalities and characters that shine through. So I was just curious if there were one or a few that you guys were really proud of writing or that you gravitated towards, both while writing and while just directing.
I think there's one that's definitely a favorite of both of us, and it was a one that we both wrote stuff that we're really pleased with, but also the actor brought a huge amount to it, which is the character of Mickey, played by Rob Tofield. Because you'd worked with him on a short before, hadn't you, Connor? And he's just such a funny actor, and the stuff that he would bring to it. And you know, we have the scene for him. He'd deliver a few takes as we'd written, and then he'd go off on one. And quite often that was the stuff that made it in, just because, you know, he's really good. And it was just an exciting character for us to create, because we created this character together, knowing kind of that we wanted Rob to do it. And then he brought something else to it that just elevated the character that little bit more.
Yeah. I think it was also just the dynamic overall, that family. That was something that really stuck out to me initially, and something I was very, very interested to explore. Just this bunch of misfits, you know, all coming together with a common goal. I just knew there was going to be a lot of comedy to draw from that.
That's amazing. And it's like but it's a really like it's found family in a way. And
Yeah.
kind of sad, but also kind of I don't know. It's got like an endearing quality to it, but also that darkness to it again that you guys were talking about before. And I love that kind of dichotomy. And so in making this movie, were there any kind of mockumentaries, pseudo documentaries that you looked to kind of as research or as kind of thoughts about how to inspire the format and how you were going to make the film?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's the classics, you know, The Office being a big one. I think in terms of the visual style, we were quite influenced by the likes of What We Do in the Shadows, because whilst it is a mockumentary, it is slightly more stylized. The cinematography, you know, it's quite beautiful actually in places. The set design and the cinematography and the lighting, it's not quite so drab as some of those original mockumentaries, you know.
Yeah.
So we decided to try and infuse it, and you know, likewise with the music and the sound design and the production design, the costumes. We tried to just elevate the mockumentary so it still felt visually pleasing, at least from my point of view.
And Ed, were there any that you were kind of pulling from when you were thinking about it?
I mean, yeah, the kind of big one for me, I mean, What We Do in the Shadows was definitely kind of in our kind of in our thoughts throughout the process. But as weirdly, the one for me was Spinal Tap, just because it's that balance between these characters that are kind of pathetic and at times awful, but hopefully we can make you kind of care about them a little bit, even though they are awful and a bit pathetic. But you get to have this little insight into their world. So yeah, Spinal Tap for me was This Is Spinal Tap was a big kind of influence, weirdly, despite not being at all horror or about serial killers.
I also saw a lot of Behind the Mask, the story of Leslie Vernon.
Yeah.
Have either of you seen that? Because you have, oh, there's a train going by my house. Apologies. Well, it's like you have that making of a serial killer, but you have this one's much more endearing and obviously funnier than that. But it was interesting to kind of watch it thinking about that film. Have you both seen Behind the Mask, the Leslie Vernon?
Yeah,
I actually haven't.
Yeah.
It would be a really cool double feature with this, I think. I think it would be a really interesting tonal double feature for sure.
Yeah, I heard a lot about it actually, and then I thought, you know what, I'm not going to watch it because I'll end up being influenced by it, and I knew there was certain similarities, so I decided not to. But you know what? Actually, now the film's completely locked. I'm gonna give that a watch for sure.
I think you should. You'd like it.
You should. It's a great double feature. But so, what's next? Would you guys want to make another horror movie or a comedy? Like, what kind of is the dream next for the both of you for movie making?
Well, we're developing a few projects together at the moment. We've actually got a TV series that is going more down the sort of straight horror route, but with a bit of a twist to it. And yeah, we're trying to develop some dark comedies as well. But I think, yeah, dark comedy is definitely something I would like to do again. I really enjoy being able to, you know, try and make people laugh, but also you can bring some thrills and some scares and whatnot into it as well. So
it's harder than you think. I feel like it's really, really easy to mess up a dark horror comedy. And I feel like it's an art to make it. I mean, because comedy and horror go together so well, but I feel like it's hard to strike that balance, which I think the movie does really well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, it was something, as Ed alluded to earlier, it was something we were discussing all the time, and we didn't really know if we'd pulled it off until we started showing audiences. And you know, I do think people do find it quite shocking sometimes, the little twists and turns that happen. And you know, most people seem to have really responded well to it. Some people are like, "Holy shit, you guys went dark with that!" But you know,
like,
it's what we wanted. This is, you know, these are serial killers. This is, you know, we're not going to pull the punches here. It's like, if you're going to tell a story about serial killers, there's going to be some blood.
Got that on the poster.
But there's gonna be some blood. That's the log. That's like the tagline. Yep, exactly. And I just have one last question for the two of you. I mentioned double features earlier, but if you were going to program a double feature, any double feature with When the Screaming Starts, what film would you pick? Ed, I would like you to go first.
I've thought about this a lot, actually.
Oh my God.
And I think
I always catch people off guard with this question, so I love that you were like, I've been thinking about this.
no, I've spent a long time thinking about this, and I think the best. I mean, to be honest, it's really just a double feature I would like to see. But when the screaming starts with Creep 2, I think would work really well.
Ooh, yeah. Oh my God. Wait, that's
Yeah.
that's incredible.
I haven't thought about this question. I, you know what? The first thing that popped into my head was Shaun of the Dead, but that film's so good that I wouldn't want to put it side by side. Maybe just
We'd
try and
have to
find
be
a really bad
for that.
What's that?
We'd have to be like the supporting act for that. We're the
Yeah, we'll be the
kind
warm
of
up,
the local
warm up
band.
The opener.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go with that then.
Cool. I love that. Well, thank you both for chatting with me today. And everyone, the film is screening as part of Fan Effects, and keep an eye out for more information about it when it's going to get a wider release.